started. Thank you everyone for joining today. Our demo webinar, our new demo webinar series. Just to give you guys a little bit of background, first of all, I will be the presenter and your MC today. So from end to end, I'll be answering questions. I'll be giving you guys the rundown of the new product features and the new content for SafeBreach. But first, a little bit of background about myself. My name is Michael DeGroat. I'm the Director of Sales Engineering at SafeBreach. I lead all of the pre-sales engineers and have been with the company for about 4.5 years now. I'm so excited to be here to talk to you today about the new stuff that we're offering. So let's go over kind of a brief agenda of what we're going to talk about today. First, for those of you who may be new to what breach and attack simulation is, I'm going to give you a brief rundown of what the domain is about, how we do what we do. And then I'm going to switch over to a brief product demo. I'm going to cover high level how the platform works, how you would do some certain things, and cover new features that we have released in the product. Then after that brief product demo, come back and talk a little bit about what we've added to our playbook in the recent months. There's been actually some good activity that we've added. And then at the end, I will take some time to answer any questions that anyone may has. Please feel free to use the Q&A option here in the webinar. I'll be monitoring that as we go along, and if there's a question I can answer immediately that may be relevant to where I am, I'll be happy to do so. If not, I'll take the rest of the questions at the end. So let's just hop right to it. What is breach and attack simulation? So breach and attack simulation is really about mimicking the way an adversary works within your enterprise to understand the effectiveness of your security controls. So really validating the security controls in your infrastructure. And it starts with the first thing, which is simulating the TTPs that the adversary is using in your environment to test the defenses. How effective are the controls that I'm putting in place, the layered approach that I may be using, or where I may not have security controls to understand what I need to put into place. And so taking those real world TTPs and using a platform, an automation platform, to simulate all of that across the enterprise. Then once that's done, we visualize those exposures, being able to drill through things, look for the results, look for the details of that, being able to understand what those results actually mean, and using that data to really help drive decisions that we're going to make. And the third thing is prioritizing vulnerabilities that are exploitable. Because a breach and attack simulation platform understands the landscape of the security controls and the risk that is being posed by either misconfigured security controls, accepted risk, risk that hasn't been mitigated yet, being able to prioritize what you would be doing with your vulnerability management program. With that context is that third pillar rather, and then the fourth pillar, holistically remediating to defend your enterprise, taking the details of the simulation information and then going out to those controls, remediating them so you can understand exactly where things are, how things need to be fixed, and then going back and actually completing the cycle again, starting at that very beginning, is that re-simulating those TTPs, doing some closed loop validation in the enterprise. So what are the primary use cases for a breach and attack simulation platform? I've talked about security control validating your endpoint security control. How is my EDR defending against the latest techniques that an adversary may be using, or maybe a signature-based antivirus to understand, the basics of can something be dropped to disk. Understanding how effective my network security controls are. Are my firewalls or my IPSs detecting those actions or blocking them the way they should be? And so being able to validate that. My cloud infrastructure, how is my AWS configured, and is it configured in a way that an adversary couldn't use that environment to, say, use an S3 bucket as an exfiltration point, or to be able to create or enumerate EC2 instances, things like that. So being able to validate how effective my controls are that I'm wrapping around my cloud infrastructure, and doing that in its entirety, from start to finish, endpoint, network, cloud, all in one fell swoop. Secondly is risk-based vulnerability management. We understand what the risk is. We understand the threats. Now, taking into account the vulnerabilities, being able to say, here is, if we have a exposure to the outside world that's very, very big in one area, we maybe need to focus on the vulnerabilities there, because that consequence could mean a adversary could do significant damage to an area. So prioritizing our vulnerability management program based on the information that we have from breach and attack simulation. Thirdly, the idea of evaluating a organization that a company may be about to acquire. So part of the M&A activity, due diligence process, deploying a breach and attack simulation solution into an organization that you're about to acquire or have just acquired, to understand what is the risk of rolling that entity into the corporate infrastructure, and then going about mitigating and bringing that organization up to the standards of your organization, so that you feel safe during that merger and acquisition. And then lastly, something that's becoming more and more common in breach and attack simulation is threat assessment. Evaluating an individual threat, whether it's a ransomware family, whether it is a malware family that's been exposed, or a threat group or threat actor that you want to understand what is going on in my environment. How are my controls protecting me against, say, a Fin6 or the Cozy Bear or the Jaff ransomware or whatever that threat may be? Getting an answer very quickly and then being able to trend how are we doing over the course of time at protecting that. Are we drifting away from an approved baseline, et cetera. So those are the four key use cases really around a breach and attack simulation platform. So let's talk real quickly about the new features that SafeBreach has added. That's going to help you meet those use cases in your environment. So we just, for general availability, released our flexible dashboarding component. Our dashboarding component is going to deliver some very rich visualizations of the data that we're gathering from our simulation results in just a few clicks, very customizable to a specific alignment of the stakeholder, whether it's security or the business goals, or marrying those two data together. And then the ability to export, share those dashboards with the people who are necessarily wanting to grab that information. Some of the key use cases around that, you can see generate reporting and tracking based on a business unit, threat assessment, what the security controls are doing, combining a lot of the different data that we're gathering, whether it's the control information, the MITRE ATT&CK TTPs, and then building around KPIs for both business, the organization, and those various different levels in real time. The data is updated as simulations that we run in our platform are executed. So with that, I'm going to just kind of hop over real quickly to our solution here and show you guys how you would go about running through some simulations and then what you would get out of that. And then I'll demonstrate the dashboarding feature here. So the foundation of any breach and attack simulation platform is going to be a robust content library of attacks to simulate. And this is where SafeBreach really shines here, is that we have over 26,000 what we call breach methods or individual attack techniques that an adversary may use that we can simulate. We've organized it in a number of different fashions, but let's just take an example of that threat assessment, right? Understanding really where is our gap against a particular threat assessment. And so we deploy simulators, it's a piece of software that we deploy into the various trust zones or various security zones in the organization. And those simulators, in essence, they play war games against each other. One simulator plays the role of the attacker, the other plays the role of its target. They run through their set of attacks and then send up the information to this management console. And so our playbook here is quite vast. It is categorized, first of all, by attack phase. You can do it by security control category. So if we go back to also that control validation use case of, I want to validate how effective my controls are against all of the different attacks that SafeBreach can simulate against a certain control category, like my endpoint security control or my cloud or my container environment. I can choose those directly here from the playbook. I can focus on an attack type. So I may be thinking about, the latest attack, and I want to think about, outbound server CNC server communication that's associated with that. I can select that attack type. The playbook will then focus its content based on that. And then lastly, I can look at MITRE tactic, technique, sub-technique, or threat group. We can also integrate with threat intelligence platforms for further enrichment of our content with data or our IOCs or TTPs from a threat intelligence platform to be able to pull in that data and then take it where you would normally just add it to maybe a policy, but now take that data and verify it with a threat intelligence platform information. So say, for example, I just wanted to run, Fin6, right? I wanted to understand what my particular exposure is in my environment to Fin6. I would merely come into the platform. I see all the attacks that are associated with this. This is everything that SafeBreach has that will cover this threat group. I can simply come in, select the button for all of the attacks. The platform will highlight those attacks. I can then select the simulators I want to run them on. I can choose my attacker. I can choose my attacker. So say I want to choose 4 or 5 different parts of my environment. I can also choose the entirety of my environment. So I can choose everything. I can focus on an operating system or different releases or data assets, etc. I've already chosen my attacks from the playbook. So all the attacks that are associated with this threat group of Fin6. And now I can choose my targets, just merely choosing where I want to validate my environment against this threat group. I can then schedule this to run on an ad hoc basis, so I can run it, once, and then, maybe overnight, or I can set this to run on a weekly basis. The idea here is being able to create some automation and repeatability. As I run these simulations, I start to understand and look at the results on top of that. And then I set this to run, and then the platform will go about executing those attacks. Next, once those attacks finish, that data is going to be pulled up to the management server, and the management server is then going to help you find analytics through that. So the platform will aggregate all of the simulation results across all of those different tests you run, whether you're running that specific threat group, whether you're running that specific security control. We're still going to take all that data and start to build analytics around that so you can understand very quickly where my gaps are. And we talked about visualizing the attack. So the first way we can do it is through our visualization tool of our Breach Explorer. This is taking into account all that data. I can highlight a target that I'm interested in. The platform will highlight the attack path that's most probable. It will allow you to play through different scenarios. So these are all simulators that we have in this environment. I can say I'm going to highlight through my corporate user environment and show me a path that exists through here. And so I can then start to prioritize where I want to mitigate these attacks and the various parts of the attack chain. I can also assume that this target has been breached, and could an adversary take some important data out of the organization. So allow me to visualize the attack path, allowing me to look at things from a 30,000 foot view to understand where I need to focus my efforts on first. Each one of these bubbles represents the number of attacks that were successful that we simulated. You can drill into this data and start to look at it from an overall perspective. The next way of doing this would be just looking at it from perhaps a MITRE perspective. If your organization is aligned to the MITRE attack framework, we can pull into the results and then overlay that data on top of the MITRE attack framework. So if we're thinking about it from a perspective of the navigator, where's my biggest risk against the MITRE attack framework? If I'm simulating a lot of attacks, what is my overall risk, and where do I need to focus my efforts on mitigation? We can further this. If we go back to that idea, I ran a simulation that's against Fin6. I can come down here and say, all right, I want to see what it looks like just on Fin6. And if I want to expand that to Fin7, I could do so as well. And the Carbonac, and look at all of these different threat groups and apply my filters. And now I can see overall against the MITRE attack framework, where is my biggest risk? I can drill into any one of these techniques and understand what was not blocked, what was getting logging from my security controls, and overall being able to understand where my risk lies against something in the MITRE attack framework. So let's take this to the next step, which would be looking at it from the perspective of overall risk in the environment, right? We're still doing this. This is kind of a tactical view of the attack framework. What about finding some insights? What about starting to think about remediation? And that next step would be what we call insights. So insights is where we take all of that data, we aggregate it together, and then we start to highlight the different attack types that are most successful in the environment and that have the biggest impact to our overall risk. So if I, for example, look at my entirety of my environment, I know that right now, because of the severity and the number of simulators that are affected, my network malware transfer is the most effective attack that an adversary can use. This is where I need to start to think about doing some remediation. I can take all the information here, download it into a policy file, upload it to a security control. I can leverage orchestration platforms to create a full workflow of simulation, remediation, and then re-simulation through something like Palo Alto XOR. So all here from a single click, and then rerunning those simulations on top of that. Then I can even, for example, coming back to that notion of that threat group that I selected, I can come in here and say, all right, let's look at that Fin 6 and Fin 7 that I was talking about, and the Carbonac threat groups. I can look at the insights that are pertinent to that threat group. And so the platform will then narrow the focus, giving me the highlights of just that threat group. I can also look at it from just external attacks. I can look at it from critical systems in the environment. All the data aggregating together here at Insights, so creating remediation action items behind that. And then the next step would then be taking this information, enriching it with vulnerability management data. So coming back to that idea of prioritization for remediation, I'm concerned about systems that may have critical exposure, so I can refocus my vulnerability management process based on simulation results, real simulation results, understanding how effective my controls are in the environment to understand where my gaps are in my vulnerability management program. So I need to affect my efforts there first. And then moving that on to be able to take this, to hand it off to my vulnerability management team to say, because an adversary can breach these systems much faster or has higher risk for critical access, I can focus my efforts on mitigating my vulnerability management program on that. So these are kind of the core features of the platform. And let's move quickly on to the last thing, which are our dashboarding tools that we just introduced. So the dashboarding tool is very much a very flexible and very customizable way of consuming data within the platform. So as you can see here, I'm looking at my overall security posture. We have a couple of templates that we've built. And I'll cover each one very briefly, and then I'll kind of walk you through what you could do by using a custom dashboard. And so let's look at, hey, we're tracking our overall, a status breakdown, what's being missed, what's being detected. We can break that down over the course of time. We can look at this for the last month. Say I want to look at things from the last 6 months. I can see my overall trend, noticing that we had a little bit of a spike around the holiday timeframe. Maybe we had some misconfigurations and change controls, things like that. And we can see that we're also drilling down behind that. We can break things down by, of course, the kill chain approach. Where is our biggest gap? So where are we doing well? So exfiltration, where we're actually preventing quite a bit of attacks, where maybe our host level is our bigger risk. I can break things down by security control category, thinking about where is my biggest gap in my overall security posture, and looking at here, my endpoint controls with the combination of completely missed and only detected actions is probably my biggest gap in my environment. And I can start to look at and investigate why that may be. We can also take an approach of looking at things by business unit, so a deployment of simulators, et cetera, and then break down by security control themselves with overlaying the different business units on top of that. And this is an out-of-the-box overall security posture dashboard. I can then add filters on top of this. I can add a filter to say that I'm, maybe focusing on something more along the lines of a control category or a overall status or a test that I'm very concerned about. Say I'm very concerned about certain tests. I can focus my efforts over there on that. The second thing would be reporting on a threat assessment. So here is where I'm looking at kind of that same data, but overlaying now the threat information. If we remember, again, coming back to that discussion we were having, I want to look at things in the reference of Fin 6, Fin 7, and I also want to look at Carbonite. What the platform will do is then highlight only the results that are relative to those threat groups that I've simulated. So now I can very quickly understand how are we doing over the course of time, where our biggest gaps on certain techniques that have been used as part of those threat groups. I can look at it against, again, that security control category. And what's even more important here is I can quickly, by this dashboard, be able to find the simulator or the location in my enterprise that is at greatest risk of a breach. And here, real quick, I can see that my corporate users environment is the environment that is at greatest risk. And so I can then click into here and understand that, all right, I want to look at the data behind this. I want to understand really what are the attacks that are getting through. I can click on this and the platform will present me with all the data, all the missed attacks that this particular part of the environment has that we have simulated. I could then take this data, export it to CSV if I wanted to, and share it with a particular team and say, hey, we need to focus our efforts on remediating this. So as you can see, the dashboards can give you a 30,000 foot view, and then you can drill very quickly down to some of the technical data behind the analytics here. So you can really look at what's going on. Another use case is around control validation, side-by-side testing. We're testing, say, for example, 3 different endpoint security controls, and we're making no statement on the effectiveness of this, but I can break it down by, say, I want to test my Cyber my Sentinel-1, and my Defender ATP. I can see that right now that while I have a heavy detection rate on Defender ATP, I actually have a fairly, a fairly high success rate of the adversary using Defender ATP when we look at things side by side. This is actually being filtered down to a specific MITRE tactic. So I could even look at it even further granularly if I wanted to, look at a specific technique if I wanted to. If I wanted to, I could drill down to, say, a specific one around gathering credentials or exfiltration or file system permission weakness, whatever it may be. I can focus that down even further and create a report around that on top of it. And these filters can be added and removed as you go. It is a dynamic dashboard, right? So we call it flexible. It is dynamic. It's going to change as you add these, and as simulations are executed in real time, this data will be updated. And then you can actually take this and you can schedule this once you've built this dashboard to the way you would like it. You can schedule this as well and send it via email out to a particular user or a particular group of people who have interest in that particular data that you're looking at. And then it is completely customizable. If I want to create my own report, and we can call it hey, I'm just gonna call it my test, give a description. But what then I can do is add my own widgets based on certain things. So say, for example, I want to look at my overall security controls, or I want to look at my overall risk. I want to look at results summary. So if I want to look at overall status breakdown, I can look at this widget. I can then edit it, and I can say, what do I want to split it on, or what filters do I want to do it on? Say I want to do it by test. So if I want to do it by test to actually look at the different tests that I'm focusing on, say I want to look at my APT 29 that I've ran a lot, I can focus it on that. By these 3, 4, 5 tests, I can look at how things are doing there. I can then add another one to add, side by side, test by test comparison. But the idea here is this is completely flexible. I can add any different number of widgets. I can create my own custom ones if I wanted to. I want to create a line graph of trend analysis, and then on one axis choose my my attacker, and then choose a particular attack type or operating system version or execution time. The idea here is we have a lot of abilities to create a very customized view of the data that we are simulating, which you can then create processes to send out this data to relevant stakeholders that you may have. Go ahead and delete that. And so that's the new dashboarding feature that we've had. It's a very powerful tool. We're very excited to present this here to you guys today. So coming back real quick to the presentation to cover one last thing, and that's the content that we've added to this solution. So first of all, the biggest one was the SolarWinds attack. So after we started to get the details around this, this particular attack, our research team went into full blitz mode and to develop content so our customers can understand their risk exposure if they are a SolarWinds customer. And obviously the basics of the campaign, right, is, the adversary stole the SolarWinds certificate, they exploited the vulnerability and installed the web shell, and then replaced it with a legitimate software package that had been Trojanized. And so then that led to the actual downloading of that Sunburst malware and the execution associated with that. So our research team then took all of that information and developed new content added to the playbook. So as you can see here, these were attacks that were added specifically targeted around the SolarWinds campaign. So we added infiltration techniques, host level techniques around that, and then the lateral movement techniques on top of that. The adversary also used existing techniques, and this is one of the things about our research team that is really awesome, is that we had existing techniques already in our playbook that adversary used. So we were able to leverage content that we already had in our playbook to add coverage to our playbook coverage for the SolarWinds campaign. And this can be executed through one click through the platform and get results very quickly on that. And this is also tied to our SLA of 24 hours for new content that's also associated with US cert alerts. So the same process would exist there. So that's going to be it for the demo of the high-level demo of the platform and the new dashboarding feature. I'd like to see if there are any questions that we may have from the field. So just one question here. So yes, all the content that SafeBreach I did show here is developed internally and maintained by our research team. So they go out, they grab the content they need, they develop that content and add it to our playbook. Any of our customers can look into the playbook and see what's new. They can see what's highlighted by our little blue flag here. So as content is updated, added, you can see that content clearly in the platform on top of that. So question about the dashboards. Yeah, so the dashboards do basically any of the data that we have on the platform around the simulation results, any of that data that we have, you can build a widget for these dashboards on. So if there's a specific test or a campaign that you're running, you want to look at side by side how you're doing each individual test to show progress to an executive leader or whatnot, you can do so. You can also grab information around the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So if you're aligning against MITRE ATT&CK framework, you can trend that out over the course of time. You can look at specific details of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, showing how we're trending against remediation information and et cetera. So all the details that we have aggregated together can be created here in that custom dashboard. So. Unless there are any other questions today, I think that will be it. I'll give just a moment here. Okay, there are no other questions. Well, in that case, I thank everyone for attending today's demo webinar and look forward to seeing you guys on a future one. If you would like more information, please visit our website at safebreach.com. There you can request a custom demo for your organization, then also learn more information about our new releases there today. So once again, everyone, thank you so much for joining and hope to see you again in the future on another one of our demo webinars.